best entertainment on the earth. Tune in for Comics with Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch, and certainly a lot of opinions on what people should and shouldn't do with comics, the direction of things, how companies should manage their portfolio. Lots of ideas out there, and I've started to hear kind of maybe very predictable complaining of, well, if the fans could do it better, why don't they just make their own company? I heard that from a writer today, and it's like, well, sure, but some will, and others will ignore it, and some of the people who do will fail. And I mean, like, I don't know. It's a weird. Again, I think it's very easy to avoid kind of silly arguments, silly kind of debates, and yet people steer toward them every time. And granted, this isn't being said out loud, at least not that I've seen yet. But if you get some criticism in your company, you're like, well, if you think you could do better, do it better. I'm like, oh, I mean, what do you think's going to happen? You're just like, you take somebody who may be just venting and turning them into an enemy. I don't know. It just seems like, hey, I have an opportunity to make my life more difficult. Let's take it. Always, every time I just am confused by the entire thing. But regardless, got a viewer question here, and it says, should DC diversify regardless? Which has been certainly a topic I've been talking about. There's been a bunch of things, news articles out there, and lots of discussion around all this. Sadly, maybe predictably, but sadly, a lot of the discussion seems to be circling very, increasingly around, John Kent is bi. And to me, that's the least interesting part of this entire debate, because I mean, when you're staring at dozens and dozens and dozens of legacy characters that where things seem to be at least aimless. Maybe that's the nicest possible word I can use. Aimless. I just passed an Arby's, like a shiver ran down my spine just going by that place. Anyway, but I'm never going to stop. I think that focusing on one character, one aspect, frankly, not an important one. Here's the crazy part, and nobody wants to hear this. The people who are complaining, certainly Tom Taylor, creation of who's creating all this and steering all this. The reality is, in the grand scheme of things, John Kent, as an adult, John Kent in his current iteration, right, has been this version of John Kent. Well, put it this way. When Saga went on hiatus, we didn't have a grown-up John Kent. So to give you some perspective, this is new. And all of this attention on a new, and frankly, in the grand scheme of things, I don't care what people think or what they think is going to happen. The odds of this current John Kent character being around in 50 years are pretty low. I mean, just again, that's not a knock on whether he's straight, gay, or anything in between. It's just it's fairly low. These things don't tend to last. So it's a lot of ado about, I don't know. It feels like you're missing the bigger picture. But anyway, to this question. It says, hey, Perch, should DC Comics diversify its ongoing titles regardless of fan opinion? The fact is there's more than enough Batman, and no one could accuse DC of not giving fans what they want if they trimmed the Bat titles and replace them with some interesting menageries of creators and characters. Cancel Batman Urban Legends and replace it with a JSA book by Venditti, or cancel Harley Quinn and replace with a Vixen by Pete Tomasi, or cancel Robbins and replace with a Cyborg book by Grant Morrison. You can effectively kill two birds with one stone and actually diversify the roster with more diverse but originally diverse heroes, meaning you could please both crowds with fan favorites. Well, you're never going to please both crowds. That's crazy talk. But anyway, we'll continue. Or hell, approach the biggest creators and say, we'll give you any title, but you can't use Batman or the Bat family. All right. So should DC do that? Yes. Yes. Full stop. Now, there's a lot of good ways they could do that would make it more successful or less successful. A lot of variants to this idea, but absolutely they should. And one of the smartest things they could do is kind of call the bluff a little bit to some extent. So if, for example, We're led to believe that Batman is just going to sell no matter what happens, right? It's so popular, it's going to do well. If that's true, then why not move the top tier creators, the ones that have the really big names, the ones that are that lead the pack? Why not move those creators to characters that are not Batman? I mean, Batman's going to sell regardless, right? So put the more amateur creators on Batman and put your biggest names on other franchises in the hopes that you can build them up to be so popular and so successful that one day you'll have it's like, I don't know what we're doing. We're publishing 40 Green Lantern titles. That would be a good idea. They should try doing that. I think that by continuing to focus on Batman, it's a very short term strategy, and I've speculated the reason behind that is completely because they're currently going through this process with Discovery. We're not sure yet whether they're going to be kept by Discovery or whether they're going to get spun out, and so you go for the easy money, and in their minds, the easy money right now is Batman. The problem is they're having to go to greater and greater lengths to try and figure out how they, squeeze more blood from that stone. It's like, here's a Batman story of before he was Batman. He was learning to be Batman. And I know we've told that story before, but this is when he was in junior high school, and he was, he was going to junior high school, and it's before he learned how to be a ninja, but it's after he learned how to do basic fight, because we've got another original graphic novel is when he was in middle school and he learned how to box. I mean, that's the level of Batman shenanigans we're getting right now, and I mean it's not healthy. So it would be a smart thing to do. I think that it's going to take time. I think that DC, to their credit, they let Hawkman go longer than I think most people expected it would before they canceled it. But they need to do that. They need to say, okay, we're going to commit 2 years, and the sales are going to be small because we've trained our audience not to care about this stuff, but we're going to retrain them. So we're going to put some effort there, and we're going to push this. And I do think that if you're trying to do diversity, I mean, to me, that you're guaranteed to fail if you're like, we need to do diversity, and the way we're going to do diversity is we're going to take Batman, of which there are 30 other Batman titles, but we're going to make one of them a black Batman, and that's what we're going to do. I just, that to me, that just listen to how that sounds coming out of your mouth. It sounds so cynical. Yikes. I mean, that just sounds like the most cynical possible way to introduce diversity to your comics. And I think you've got some really great characters. JSA has some characters in there. I agree completely about Vixen. Vixen, put out a Vixen title where they're, like I did on the other video, don't have her solving any social issues. Don't get her wrapped up into, secret racism stuff. Just give her 12 issues of Vixen full out, her powers, using them to their fullest extent and fighting major villains and kicking their ass. Do that. And what you'll emerge with at the end is a top tier superhero that nobody will argue that this character doesn't stand toe to toe with all the other big names. It would take far less time than you think. Again, 1 year of solid top stories, and put top creators. Put Jeff Johns on there. He can write a good superhero story. Figure out your best artist. Put Phil Jimenez on that book, and just go for it. Just go all in. Cyborg, same thing. You just tell a top tier superhero book. I think that's going to do far better for you. I think that will, you're right. I think if you're trying to check a box on diversity, I think that, you will get for whatever that crowd is worth, that are only looking to those things. I don't believe that crowd's buying the comic in the first place, but if that's what makes them happy, great. You can point to several titles where you've got original diverse characters and you're doing something with it. And your existing audience that I think doesn't care about diversity, but does care about the legacy of the company being honored and, having these characters be presented, I think they will appreciate it. The challenge, because I've mentioned this idea before, and the pushback I always get is, nobody cares about Vixen. When we try and do a story, look at the Cyborg series. When we try and do a Cyborg series, nobody buys it. And so, we can't justify putting Brian Hitch on the title or, somebody like that. We can't justify it because nobody buys this comic, and so we're losing money by putting it out. And that's a sad truth because people won't buy diversity. And my answer to that is, well, first off, again, you meaning you, the publisher, you created this problem. So to dig your way out of it, you've got to dig your way out of it, and that means putting your some money where your mouth is, and actually saying, you know what, yeah, we're going to lose money on this book for a period of time. We're going to put top talent on these titles, and we're going to basically send a message we care. Because right now, and man, you can't say this on Twitter because people will jump down your throat, but it is true. A lot of the new characters, a lot of the diverse characters, they put the cheapest talent they can find on those books. Some are good, some are not good. They're all unknowns. They don't bring the name value to the title. Or, they'll do something like they'll do a Champions book. They'll put Zub on it. Zub has a name as a writer, and they'll shuffle the artists around, and then they'll reboot the series in the middle. And then so you do these things to the book, and you're just cutting it off at the knees. And I think that people need to hear it said that way. You, publisher, are cutting these attempts off, and instead you're going for the cheaper approach of, well, let's just do Batman again, but this time black, or let's do Batman, but this time a woman. Again, it's such a cynical way to look at it, and you're not going to get big success out of that. However, if you go out there and you say, all right, look, we're going to do Cyborg. Yeah, we're going to put Grant Morrison on the title, and we're going to make it super weird, and we're going to pair Grant Morrison up with like Gene Ha, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to try that for a while. Or, again, put Bixen out there, put Jeff Johns on that book, put Walter Simonson on the art. Find whatever John Byrne's doing, get him to do it. Or, get Victor Bogdanovich on it. Have him do it. I'd love to see Vic on a Vixen book. See, it almost rhymes. Do that. But instead, when the big artists come in, they're like, okay, well, let's get them on Batman, and let's promote the writers on Batman, who are the people who need the least amount of promotion. That's the silliness of all this. I think that's where some changes have to occur. And I think your question is right. That's what they should do, and it'd be smart business. It would, in the end, I think, satisfying the group that's saying they want more diversity. I think that there goes another one of these Texas trucks. It apparently needs no muffler whatsoever right there. Anyway, it's satisfying that group is somewhat meaningless. I would be just as happy if the publisher ignored it completely and just tried to do what was right for the business. I think it's a group that makes a lot of noise. It is not a group that buys a lot of comics. It's not a group that gives you any kind of lasting credit for what you do, as we've seen when companies have steered in and done these diversity, efforts. That group does not do their part. They don't come to the shops and buy the comics, and so they get canceled, and that group gets pissed again. So appealing to that group, I think, is a waste of time by and large. Now, appealing to the long-term comic readers and audience, I think that's a very smart thing to do, because those typically are your whales who are buying your comics right now. And the more you can do to kind of nod to them and say, look, we're respecting continuity and history, that's a good thing. And if you can put some top-tier creators on some relatively newer characters and commit to it, like, for example, DC does that New Age of Heroes thing, but the challenge there is they invented completely new characters out of nowhere. And some of that might have worked. However, almost all the top creators vanished from the books like 3 to 4 issues in. Like that was an utter waste of time. That was the worst of both options. So they said, we're going to put top creators on these brand new characters, build up new heroes, and then we're going to move the top creators off almost immediately. And we're going to give every indication that these new heroes really don't matter to us whatsoever. And we're just going to kind of ignore them as fast as possible. Meanwhile, we've got tons of old characters that we're not using at all on the shelf that we're not bothering to do anything with. Or every once in a while, we'll drag out the character, do a one-shot, but again, put completely unknown, untested, and clearly earlier in their career creators on this who put out something that really doesn't look very good, has no name value. It doesn't do well. You then privately inside your office say things like, well, Cyborg can't sell a comic book, so we won't do that again. And then you just keep circling the drain. That's the challenge. So that would be my pick. I don't know. What about you, person listening? What do you think? What should they do? Is this the right approach? Should DC basically say, look, well, here's one more thing to do with this. If this was an independent company, if it was a smaller indie publisher, it's a much harder thing to do what I just said. You don't have the money for this stuff. So you kind of have to go where the dollars are. Now, Marvel and DC, as several people have pointed out, including myself, they are, for all intents and purposes, IP farms for their parents. They are not monitored as closely as to if they're making or losing money. There's some metrics that they have to do, but it's not nearly as close. And so the reality is, it's if that's the position you're in, take advantage of it. Use the parent company's money. Lose money. What do you think? If just for the sake of laughter, if you're DC or you're Marvel, and you say, hey, we're going to take this, relatively unknown character that's been underutilized. Like, let's say you're going to take Jim Rhodes, War Machine. And here's a story. It's a black male character and a vet and, some unique parts about him, has a movie presence. We're going to put out an ongoing title with him. And you know what? We're going to put, I don't know, who's one of our top artists on that. We're gonna go ahead and put one of our top creators. We're going to get Art Adams to do all the covers. But RB Silva's going to do the art. Art Adams is going to do all the covers, and we're going to get, I don't know, Donnie Cates, because he's a big name for us right now as a writer. He's going to do a pitch, and Donnie has promised us that his pitch is not going to be that War Machine meets an evil, demonic War Machine version of himself. So he's not going to do it this time. So we're going to get a new story here, and we're going to put this book out. It's going to cost us a lot of money, and this book is going to lose money, but we are going to keep publishing it with this exact same creative team, which we'll be paying high dollar for. We're going to keep publishing it for 3 years. We're committing to it. Do you think Disney's going to come around and be like, well, you can't do that. You'll lose money on this book. First of all, they're not going to care at all. Second, they're not going to be like, what? Again, use these arguments against them. Say, what, you want us to cancel this book? You want us to cancel this book with a black lead? Are you sure? Are you sure, white board of Disney, you want us to cancel this book? I don't know. That seems like a bad idea. You want us to put cheaper talent on this for the book featuring the black character? Okay, that's what you want? Are you sure? Like, yeah, use the game to your advantage. But go all in. But the thing is, though, A, Disney's never going to object because they don't care about the money spent there. B, they're going to be happy because that's a character that they're actually positioning for movies. So, do that. I mean, this all would make a lot of sense to just kind of go down this path. But anyway, or keep publishing Batman books, whatever you like. Can we get some more Avengers books out there? Can we get Avengers of the Multiverse Prime X? Can we get Avengers versus Eternals versus X-Men versus Fantastic Four versus the fans? Can we do that? You know what's scary is in another video, I don't know if you listened to it, I did this pitch of what would be a terrible idea for Daredevil, where it's revealed that he's actually not blind and it's kind of been a mental block all this time. And God damn it if I didn't hear from a writer who's like, that, if Chip Zdarsky ever goes off that book, I'm doing that story. I'm like, no, you don't listen to those things and do them. When Joe and I do the sarcastic pitches, you do not take those pitches and make them comics. You do not do it. Do not make a costume gala for the X-Men. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. Thanks for listening.